G'day and welcome to the Campfire Project. And today on our panel discussion, where I have Aime Hutton, who is a Youth Diversity Advisor at Inch by Inch Empowerment. How are you, Aime?
I am doing great on this Sunday evening. It's awesome.
It's Sunday evening where you are because you're in Calgary, and the rest of us here are in New South Wales, Australia. And then we have James Short, founder of the Real Dads Program and Director of the Parents Nest. How are you, James?
Awesome, Alan. Thank you to allowing me on the campfire today. Much appreciated.
I've been looking forward to this one. And I've got Paul Lange, who is the co-founder of the Hedonist Entrepreneurs Initiative. How are you, Paul?
Very well, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Now, we were sort of passing back between us, and this is what I usually do when we do a panel discussion. Always put it out to the panelists, what do you want to talk about, so they can bring their expertise into this as well. Now, we thought that with education, with parenting and all the rest of it, parenting or bullying in education was probably a major area that we needed to start with. And so we'd like to talk about that and then look at, as parents, what's our role in all of that as well. So Aime, you're working in that area right now in the schools. So can I throw it over to you to start the conversation and give us an idea of what's happening there in Canada?
Sure, yeah. Awesome. So here in Canada, lots of things are on the go because of COVID. Many schools that I know of are multifaceted, I guess we'll say. Like some are in school full, some are in school part-time and home remote learning part-time, and then others are full-on remote learning at home. So it's a wide gamut of how our children are learning right now. However, with that being said, bullying is still happening. There's a stat here I read that 35% of teenage girls still report being cyber harassed, even during online. Because I had a friend of mine say, oh, I bet the teachers are so happy that the kids are online now, so the bullying has stopped. And I'm like, actually, no, it's continuing. So what I'm doing is I'm actually in the process of designing a corporate training for educators called the 4 Pillars to Facilitating Safe Spaces for Young Female Students, because that's what I was missing when I was a girl in school. So it's a work in progress at the moment. I hope to have it ready to go in a couple of months. January would be great. And to offer it to teachers to say, okay, look, here's some tips and tools on how to make your school safe, if it's online or if it's face-to-face.
Excellent. Yeah, because I know that that's a major area, because with bullying, we thought it would stop when we worked on the playgrounds and everything else, but cyberbullying went through the roof. And so it is a major issue. James, you're doing a lot of work with helping men to become real dads in the work that they're doing. So what have you noticed? What got you into this in the first place in that particular area?
Wow. How long do we want to go on this question? That's a good one. So, I mean, for me, it was my own experience, my own journey of when my mum and dad divorced when I was 5, dad being my dad, and, no, I don't want to talk about anything. I'm going to go in the cave, and my stepmom at the time, I just wanted to talk. And, at a young age, I learned the power of communication and what not to do. As a father, and take those lessons and understanding, and that's been a quest around communication, around that self-development, and then with the coaching, and then obviously with my lovely wife Nat, she's a midwife. She teaches a course called Calm Birth. I could see a big gap in what she was teaching around the support for fathers in that transition into parenthood, juggling both work and home and all the chaos that goes with all that, and who am I, where's my role now, where am I in the perceived pecking order, and all that internal dialogue, internal battle. So that's where it's like, wow, from my own lessons, my own journey, and watching Nat and what she does, and bridging that gap, is like there's some great tools and strategies that where we can implement that as for fathers to really be, I guess, step into that role model. Particularly now we're talking around bullying, is like, how do we have those conversations with our kids? How do we have those, awareness, and how do we connect with them too, so they feel safe, and where they can actually have conversation and open up, where they're not going internal, they're not locking themselves away, where we can actually be, you know, as a father, be there for them, support them, guide them through these times.
Excellent. And Paul, you've been looking in the education system and looking at making changes. What were your realizations when you were doing all that work?
Yeah, loads. Just briefly, I was going to say, I just learned something about James I didn't know with regard to calm birth, because my wife Pauline and I went and we did the calm birth course before my son was born over 7 years ago. Phenomenal course. Just everyone, I think everyone should do it, quite frankly. So shout out for that. And the other thing I'd be really interested in finding out at some point, I don't know if anyone has stats on it, but how much, because James said something there which was really interesting. It was like, how much of how we become is based on modeling off our parents versus modeling off what our parents were not. And I can recognize, without going into details on either side of that discussion, I can identify parts of my life which are from both. I'm not sure when they were destructive or otherwise. Anyway, sorry to answer your question, mate. Yes, so my real passion around education is in reimagining how education works, because quite frankly, the education system, bar a few examples around the world, the education system these days is still constructed to churn out people essentially for an industrial age machine, irrespective of the more contemporary programs like STEAM learning and all that sort of good stuff, and the IT stuff and whatever. The basics are we put kids in school 12 years, 10 to 12 years after their on last day of year 12, they're still putting up their hand and saying, "Miss, can I go to the dunny?" And the next day we're expecting them to be out in the workforce making decisions. The other thing is there's this curriculum which still to this day includes stuff which they will never use in their life. Never. And I can say that now. I'm 53 years old, and I know there is stuff I've never used in my life. And sometimes I was that trigonometry thing. Because we used to have books. We didn't even have calculators. We had calculators. We weren't allowed. We had to look at the damn thing up in the books, right? Never. And never have I had a desire to use it. And so I reckon Elon Musk, love him or hate him, I won't weigh in on that debate, but he got it right with this one thing where he said that his son may not necessarily know how to use a screwdriver or not even want to learn how to use a screwdriver specifically, but he may want to learn how to build a rocket. And for that, he needs to know how to use a screwdriver. So I'm really passionate about two things around education. One is bespoke curriculum, and I mean bespoke from K onwards, right? Profiling children, regularly every year profiling children to understand what they're passionate about, what that really excites them. People say, "Oh yeah, but a kindergarten kid doesn't know what he's passionate or she's passionate about, or they're passionate about," to use the gender neutral term. There are profiling systems. One, bespoke educations, bespoke curriculum. Two, the ability to learn experientially in situ, not in a classroom, not even necessarily in your own city, state, or country, but to be able to have a continuum of education around whatever your bespoke curriculum is, wherever you can get it best. So if you want to learn about space, it'd probably be best going to Cape Canaveral, or if you're left-leaning, you might want to go to Beijing and the CCP's rocket launch pad. But go where you can get the information firsthand and learn firsthand. Anyway, I'll.
Yeah, well, you had me when you mentioned profiling the kids.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, you know how. I mean, people tell me you can't profile kids. Well, yes you can. I'll say, go and talk to this bloke, and you can.
Yeah.
I got a question just on that bespoke, Paul. I think it's an amazing analogy and framework that you've used. And this is for you both, Paul and Aime, if we were to venture down that process of having bespoke courses for kids to really work on their strengths, their passions, their desires, and so forth, where does bullying then come into that mix? Because they're engaged, they're intrigued, they've got purpose. Where does that now bullying sit?
If I might say on that one, as soon as I look at that, I go, fair enough, you're going to find bullying reduces dramatically simply because most bullies have either been bullied themselves, feel inferior, and it's the only way they can feel better about themselves is by dragging everybody else down. But when you feel great about yourself and you're doing what you love to do, you're too busy doing that to go and bully somebody as an alternative. It's not going to happen.
Yep, I reckon so.
Yeah.
Let's bring in the expert.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Good question.
I really would hope so that would be the case. However, like thinking of my own situation that I went through in school for 6 years, I was passionate about different things, yet I was called names every day in school. So every time I went to open my mouth to speak, to answer a question that I actually had an interest in, I was laughed at. So I hope that it would work. And I also know that hurt people hurt people. So in this case, hurt children hurt children. So regardless if what the child is passionate about, someone's going to say, I'm feeling crappy about myself. Regardless if I'm passionate about space rockets, I'm going to come over and bug you who's passionate about dance and nitpick you that way. You know, and this also goes with teachers. And if I'm understanding the language, I'm thinking I'm understanding the way this conversation is about following the student in what they want to study or their passions. Is that the bespoke curriculum that you're mentioning?
So in principle, profile the child at the beginning of the year. Have a system for that. Now, Alan can provide that as as a first stop.
Yeah.
Agree. Depending upon the age of the child, K obviously needs more parental guidance. High school year 3 possibly less. But agree between the child, the parent or guardian, and the teaching staff what the project for the year is going to be. Now, this concept already exists loosely. You can already in Australia, for example, do your year 12. You don't have to follow the curriculum. You can actually follow a project and create the project. And there are many examples of that, especially, for example, the Steiner schools do that.
That's really cool. Because I know here we don't have that.
So you create so basically what I'm saying is the bespoke curriculum is focused around a project. What does that child want to do this year to achieve by the end of the 12-month period? And in the course of pursuing that project, they need to learn this, this, and this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking that's kind of what it was. So thank you for clarifying. But like, so, and it goes with the teacher too. Like another part of my story is when I was in high school, in my grade 12 year, actually, I took a grade 13, because at that point, Ontario had 5 years of high school, and your 5th year was more if you're going into university, you took like senior level academic type courses. So I took a biology course because I was a lifeguard and a swim instructor. So I had that knowledge and like of anatomy and physiology. And when I was in, the first day or two of class, I noticed I was having struggles because it was something I wasn't interested in, and went to the teacher for help. And he looked at me and he's like, Amy, you're left-handed. I'm like, yeah. He's like, you'll never pass my class because I was left-handed. So, I sat quiet the whole entire time until the end of semester when it was anatomy and physiology of the human body. And I started answering the questions again, and I was getting them correct. And the teacher turned around now in front of everybody in the class, will say 30 students, and said, where did you come from? And I thought, I've been here this entire time, but you've just not seen me. So I would hope that the curriculum you're explaining in grade 12, I would love to see it here and for other places. And then that goes to one of the principles actually in these facilitating safe spaces, is having it more student-led than teacher-led. Because if it's student-led, then the student has that personal power coming back to her, and like knowing that what she wants to do and her leadership skills and so on and so forth.
Well, that's exactly how it was. And I know this very specific example from the Steiner School in Sydney, Rudolph's, because we're looking at sending my son there. There was a year 12 student who absolutely didn't want to follow the normal HSC curriculum. He wanted to do something with architecture. So he wanted to build a pagoda. That was his project. So I'll build a pagoda. So he had to go and do everything. He had to cost the thing. He had to project manage the thing. He had to figure out all the materials he needed and all the rest of it, right? End of this 12 months, there's this beautiful pagoda, right? Anyway, long story short, this guy went on to work as an architect in a top firm in Dubai, came back to be a partner in a top firm in Sydney, and now is living a very, very comfortable life in New South Wales as a partner in a really big company. So, you know, just goes to show you don't need to do the traditional route. This was only 1 year he got to do. Imagine if he'd done this from K every year. And it doesn't matter, kids change their mind what they want to do. You know? Yep. Every year a different project, build up, and you're building on the skills anyway. You're going to build your language skills, you're going to build your reading and your writing and your arithmetic automatically by having what doesn't matter what you got to do.
Yeah.
Always come into it. Just you won't have to go and figure out the cosine of you know, the square root of 953.2. I don't know.
Maybe the thing is, you don't have to focus on the subjects in that case. You're doing the subjects, but you're not focusing on the subjects.
Yeah.
You're focusing on the end thing so they can see an achievement. Whereas with doing a subject, marks aren't a great achievement. You know, where you go around and tell your friends, oh, I got 99 or 100 out of the exam. You tell your friends that and they got nowhere near that. Well, you've probably blown it with them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think winners don't compete. It's real simple. I realize that's sort of counterintuitive to most people, but winners don't compete. And this whole scoring system we have, you know, in my son's school down the road here, they have this bronze and silver and gold award system. Like, it is so, you know, putrid, quite frankly. It teaches kids the wrong, for me, it teaches kids the wrong message. You know, oh, we're going to get this gold award, we're going to get this bronze award, we're going to whatever it is. And it's the same with marks. It's the same with in Australia, we have, what the hell is it called? This NAPLAN test. It's monkeys swimming, fish climbing trees. It really is, right? It's supposed to standardize testing. How do you you only want to standardize testing if you're going to have an industrial age thing where they all have to be the same robotic Brave New World style class. And then in the Brave New World, of course, you'll have no bullying one would expect, because everyone's on the same level and everyone's sucking down their own you know, allocated quantity of soma every night.
Oh, you could go down that rabbit hole so long, Paul. I know that, my friend.
I'll pull back.
Ease up, son. Ease up. I remember, I just want to share a little story. I remember we spent some time in Bali back in 2017, and one of the schools over there was called the Green School. And they actually shared a very similar philosophy where 1 year the whole project was the river system. And so they had K to year 2 look at the impacts of the river and what's involved with the river. I think year 3, 4 was looking at what were the animals and what was the reproduction, and all the way up to year 11 and 12, where they look at what's the commercial aspect of the river. And so each part of a year learned a different aspect, same project, just different part. Based from what there, and so it's like a beautiful seamless process of going from granular to then, okay, well, what's the impact of this on a commercial level as well? So yeah, just another different viewpoint.
I remember there's a school on the Gold Coast because we were looking at moving to the Gold Coast called Silkwood. They don't have a headmaster, they have a CEO, but what you just said, James, they reminded me, because they have a very similar thing. You know, they go from first the system, then next bit in the ecosystem, all the way up. And one of the things that reminded me was when we were talking to them about sending our son there, because we were going to move to the Gold Coast at the time, I asked them about bullying in the student body, and they said they do not have it. I'm like, that can't be. I said, why don't you have it? And he went into, I can't give you the verbatim answer, but he went into a long explanation about how their system and their way of educating and their approach to education just built a different mindset in the kids, and that was really, really cool. So, you know, I do believe that bullying is, firstly, you know, like Amy's going to come in our pre-talk. Amy was talking about how she was asked a question about, you know, where does it come from? It starts in the home if your kid's the bully. So it comes from both the home and from this lack of something in the current education system.
Yeah, I think that push to be competitive is a bigger part of it, because I'm a director of one of the Montessori primary schools, and there the focus is on community and helping the kids be part of a community. When you're part of a community, you're working with everybody. But when we're teaching the kids to compete with each other all the way through, then they're going to, if they're behind somebody else, they're going to lash out. If they feel that they're never quite getting there and people are looking at them and they're never good enough, they're going to do it. They're going to bully other kids. Like Aime, you were saying that you love the thing you were doing and you were applying, but you were still getting bullied. Well, if the other kids loved what they were doing as well, did you, when you were doing your stuff and you were focused on it, did you ever think of bullying anybody?
No.
No. So if the other kids had the same type of thing where they're focused on what they're doing, they're loving it and everything else, they were the same mindset. It's not a matter of beating the bullies up, because we'll never stop bullying by beating bullies up, because that's how they started in the first place. We've got to find a way in which to empower them. First of all, disempower them so that they can't, the kids who are, it's not a matter of how do we stop bullying, how do we prepare our children to be able to, survive through the bullying and thrive through it. And then that disempowers the bullies, and then we can get to the bullies because they're no longer getting their jollies. We can now work with them to raise their self-awareness.
Yeah, totally. And we sort of touched on it a little bit. A lot of it in the school comes down to the school culture. And it comes from like your administrators, like down to the principals, to the teachers, and it's like a ripple effect. So that's why like designing this program to actually work with teachers and principals and, talking about big, hairy, crazy goals. Like I would love to go to the United Nations and speak in Geneva about this subject, about why this education needs to change. And also, like, yes, academics are important. We've all agreed to that. However, right now, I feel even more important is actually your social and your emotional health of both your staff and your students.
I think there's a TED talk right there, Aime.
Yep,
just putting it out there. No pressure. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, no, actually. So, to give gratitude, actually, to this card here is actually from my coach, and I took her 16-week professional speaking program, but it's way more than just a speaking program. And at the end, I came out of it with a TED Talk style about this subject, about why social and emotional health is important, and bullying, and sharing my own story, and so on and so forth. So it's one of my passions, as you can tell. So but it needs change, like to speak to high level educators, government levels, to say in a polite way, whiskey tango foxtrot, change the way things are going in your schools to have that better outcome. Like example, you said, I took grade 12 math, but not my grade 13 math, because I knew going to university, I didn't need a math credit to get in. So I didn't take it. But still, I didn't, in my grade 12 math year, like I haven't used trigonometry or calculus or anything like that in my day-to-day life.
If you're like me, I can't even spell it.
That's why we have digital assistants. And I had, there's a friend of mine, her daughter, now just turned 16 actually, but ever since I've known her, and I've known her since she was 4, she was always a little bit alternative. And from the latest at the age of 8, she was always, I'm a boy. Yeah. And now she goes to a very, very Catholic, very private school here in Sydney. I won't say which one, but they have been very accommodating, because she was going through that whole transit. Well, yeah, at that age they weren't allowed to, and there was a cutoff date. I think it was 13, where they, if they didn't get onto the hormones or whatever by then, they weren't able to, and so they missed the cutoff date due to all sorts of government stuff. But she, the school accommodated him by allowing him to go to a gender neutral toilet. They designated a gender neutral toilet, wore boys' clothes instead of girls' clothes, and all the rest of it, right? And still she got bullied like crazy. And her passion for school dropped dramatically. And I realize that's probably one of the most polarizing reasons why people get bullied, as opposed to just, hey, I want to be an absolute shithead, so I'm going to go and pick on someone because I don't feel good with myself, versus someone who looks or appears as being completely different. Do you come across a lot of that in your what you do, Aime?
I have friends that are part of the transgender community. I have friends that are parents of either a non-binary child or a transgender child. And it's like the statistics of children who are transgender or non-binary that are bullied, their statistic level of dying by suicide is a lot more and is higher than a cisgender boy or cisgender girl. So I'm in the realm because I identify as someone who's attracted to women, and so I've been educating myself on the whole thing, and it's actually it's sad and scary, and more work needs to be done. And I recently came across a website that gives the top 150 countries of a ranking of -0, like, and all the way up to 150 of places to travel and not to travel if you identify as LGBT. And Australia and Canada are like, Canada is like 149 out of 150 ranked. And I don't remember what Australia is, but it's really close to the top as well. But then there's other countries, and some of them were a bit of surprise to me. Example, Jamaica, that you can still go to jail or still get penalized if you identify as part of the LGBT community.
Right. Interesting. I mean, it was illegal here in Australia until, wasn't it the late 70s or something like that?
Something like that, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, even with that's another issue again. Yes, we can change the laws and things like that, but we've still got the views, the attitudes of the general population and how they feel about things. It's got to work on that as well. But one of the things that I see as far as education goes, as you mentioned before, Paul, the education system hasn't changed. I'm older than all of you. I'm going back to, I started work at the age of 16 in 1969. So, and the education system, I look at it, yes, it has changed. Whiteboards replaced blackboards, and marking pens have replaced chalk. I know there'll be a lot of teachers who might be listening to this will say a lot more has happened, but from a student's point of view, the one who's sitting in the classroom, no, nothing's really changed. Because I've got grandkids now and I'm talking to them, and my sons, what they went through.
Absolutely. And it's not even whiteboards anymore. Yes, they're whiteboards, but they're these smart whiteboards, which are hanging on the wall. They're plugged in. They're probably even connected to the internet, and they still use them like a blackboard. And the other thing is this, right? My son watches more videos. I mean, he watches videos at home, right? But he watches more videos in school than he watches at home. And that's saying something, right? Back in the day, whether right or wrong, teachers, I believe, had a greater wealth of knowledge, because you ask them a question and they'd either know it or they'd tell you how to go and find it. And how to find it was, well, you go to the encyclopedia, or you go and find a technical book or whatever it was on it. Children don't need teachers anymore for information. Teachers who stick to this idea that they are the fountain of truth and knowledge are making themselves irrelevant. Because if I want to know about space, I'm going to go to nasa.gov or a space agency in whatever country. If I want to know about archaeology, I'm going to go to the Australian Museum website. I'm going to go to some other archaeological website or whatever, because I know how to talk to my phone or my tablet or my computer at home and say, hey, search this. And kids know how to do that. They don't need teachers for that. What they need, and this takes me to a conversation I had with my son's first year teachers this year, at the beginning of the year again, and in fact, K teachers last year. Teachers need to facilitate the passion for education. And they said to me, what do you, what would you like, us to focus on? Specifically, is there something you want to have us focus on with regard to Quentin? Like, only thing I want you to do is to encourage his passion to learn, because he is passionate about learning. When he gets his teeth into something, he really goes for it, which reminds me of a comment on my report card for year 10 from my year master, which sort of resonates with everything else I've said. And he made the comment, Paul tends to learn those things which he likes the most. No shit, Sherlock. Thanks, Mr. Peters. If you're still alive.
Highlight of year 10 right there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right?
Yeah, when you talk about teachers, the teachers who have that attitude, because educate doesn't mean put in, it means draw out.
Yeah.
Just draw that passion out. The teachers who can fire that up in the children, pay them more money. Don't lose them. They're the ones that we need. Teachers in that role are absolutely vital. We need them. We're telling everybody that our roles are changing, our work, and all the jobs that I've educated for disappeared. Ones that kids are learning for right now at school, those jobs won't exist when they finish their schooling. Well, the same message there is for the teachers as well. Your job has changed. It's gotten back to, because we didn't have a source of where you can get all this information from, it had to come through the teacher. But now there's so many sources of where we can get that information. The teacher can really now step into their true role, which is to be that person who inspires them, who draws out of them. And if they're doing that, those kids are more respectful to the teachers. The teachers love their work. They don't have sick leave because they can't wait to get to work on Monday. The kids are happier. And if the kids are all happier, there's no bullying. And parents, when the kids come home, if they're happier, they're not going to be, on your shoulders as well, on your backs, giving you a hard time, because they've learnt about community. And so you're part of their community. I don't see this as rocket science at all.
No, absolutely. I love that concept of draw out, because the purpose of education has multiple purposes. One of them is to create true knowledge, and you only get knowledge by taking information, putting it into action, and that creates knowledge. It creates experiences and outcomes, and from that you get knowledge, and that's the education process. And you don't get that by. I love that, draw it out. It's really, really cool. I remember. There was, and also teachers need to remember that what they've learned may not be true. I realize the Victor's right history, and again, I'm not going to go down that path, but the Victor's right history, right? But my son is half Dutch, half Australian, right? Because his mum's both Dutch born and Australian naturalized. And the Dutch discovered Australia. It wasn't the British who discovered Australia. Okay, the Aboriginals walked across the ice or whatever tens of thousands of years earlier. But in terms of Western culture, European, whatever, the first people to discover Australia were the Dutch. And it's well documented. I mean, go to the State Library in New South Wales, there's this big bloody marble mural on the floor on the entrance in Dutch to celebrate the fact, right? So my son, first year, they're going into a lesson about the history of Australia. And my son pipes up, "Oh, miss."
It is your son.
No, totally right.
Who would have thought, right? Miss, the Dutch discovered Australia. No, they didn't, Quentin. Oh, yes, they did. No, it was the English. Well, watch a video, you'll see. Okay. They watched the video. The Dutch discovered Australia.
Awesome.
It's like, yes, okay, so you were right. Yes, okay. And next.
Yeah. And to, piggyback on the comments that you made about, the teachers to inspire and to facilitate, so that can be their role. When I first shared publicly about the teacher I had in high school that really teared me down instead of raised me up, I'm actually connected to my former field hockey coach and history teacher from high school in Facebook. And she actually commented, she's like, "Aime, I wish you had come to me to tell me, because I would have done my best to help you, because that should not have happened." And so, yeah, helping the teachers remember that, check your bias at the door, and you're there to inspire the children, to motivate, to encourage, to empower, not to say you're not going to pass the class because you're left-handed.
Yeah.
That's my major saying that I always say to people, look, a leader is not somebody who just keeps everybody at a certain level, brings them up to that and keeps them there. A leader makes them self-redundant by raising everybody up so they can take over that role. The teacher who inspires the kids is a true leader, because they're teaching those kids to come up and go out into the real world and go beyond whatever they've been able to achieve themselves. That's a true leader, and they're the ones that need to be admired and
absolutely.
celebrated.
Yeah, absolutely. My son's kindergarten teacher was like that. Miss Petrassa, I don't even know where she is. I wish I could find her. She's phenomenal. But I had one of those teacher bullying moments myself when I was in year 2 in New Zealand, Epsom Convent. So these Catholic nuns have a lot to answer for, as do the Jesuit brothers at St. Helens, by the way. There's a reason like why half lower than all shore are the way they are. Most of them went to these Jesuit schools with the brothers in the leather straps. But anyway, in New Zealand, Monday morning, there was no butter. But my father had lived in Europe, and he'd been to Europe quite often. In Germany, you have schmaltz, which is basically either goose or pork fat. And you sometimes season with onions and stuff. So we just had roast goose the night before on a Sunday, and the fat was there, and he made, it's in the fridge. He's like, well, let's just have this on the toast. So here's me in school the next day, because we were talking about nutrition. I was like, Miss, I got some news. Anyone got any news? Yes, Miss, I got news. Yeah. Yes, Paul. Well, Miss, we didn't have any butter this morning. And so I put goose fat on my toast. Really proud, right? Oh, how, like, okay, I'll shut up, right? That was dressing down number 1. I'd be like, hey, check your bias at the door would be my message now. And number 2 was at St. Aloes, where the teacher asked, so why do you think the traffic lights are red when you have to stop? Well, here's me, I'm doing my whole, just got my association that a red traffic light means stop. And anytime you see a red sign, it's sort of like, indication to stop, and anything red in nature, you just don't touch and stop. And I got that programming already. So, yes, I know, I know. Yes, Paul. Why is the red stoplight? Why is the stoplight red? I said, because red means stop. How stupid, Paul. Stop here. Red's, apparently the answer was red's such a penetrating color that you see it easier, and therefore you know how to stop. I found that out, later after I calmed down and dared to put my hand up and ask something again. But I never put my hand up and volunteered ever again.
Yeah. Well, I've got the idea that your name wasn't really Paul, it was Johnny.
Might as well be.
And that's the thing, is like, yes, red does mean this. That was the thing that it finally does. But through this progression of, red does this, it's penetrating color, it's all the rest of it. But red, stop, red, stop. So you just went from the beginning to the end. You didn't worry about the journey through the middle. So you got the solution.
Yeah,
nice and quickly.
Which is sort of the way I've been in life, high level, low level, and I can't give a shit what's been in between. By the way, my middle name is John.
Of course it is.
So I know we've sort of gone off track and around the place and everything else, but it really brings it all together. I see that, okay, everything that happens has an impact. So if we have a teacher who is not connected, then that's going to have an impact on us. That's going to affect our behaviours, and our behaviours are going to affect others. And that's when, if we're feeling down, we're likely to bully the other kids. So really, it's not so much what area do we need to go and fix. It's looking at the whole lot and seeing how everything integrates and works together. I know that your program, James, with helping men to understand their role, because that's where the Campfire came from originally, the Campfire Project, because most men didn't know their role. They were confused. They didn't know where they fitted within the family. They didn't know where they fitted in with work, with all the equality stuff that's out there. And so we started the Campfire Project, and you got the same thing with the father. You got your partner, you feel like you're leading the family, then you have a child, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I'm no longer leading the family. Where am I now? I'm surplus to needs. And so being able to teach them, because those men are going to be depressed, and they're going to affect the people around them.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Alan, in relation to it's a multi leveled approach, particularly when it comes to bullying. We have the home unit, and this is what Amy touched on before. We have the home unit, we have the teaching unit, we have the kids unit, we have the education system unit. So it's a multiple leveled approach, and it's almost like a Pandora's box. But if we can just start at a level and having a rippling effect can have a huge impact in that. If it's education, if it's awareness, if it's an understanding. We had my daughter Lily, she's 13, started high school, going from 15 girls in her one class for the whole year to 150 girls in the same year. It's just like, whoa, full on. And obviously there was some feedback. And so it's like having that understanding and coaching her of like, well, let's have an understanding of where that actually is coming from. And let's look at, and let's ask those questions where this girl's, saying these remarks and finding out where that's caused from. And well, next minute she just goes, well, opens up around her home life, how, mum and dad divorced and this, and it's finding it hard. It's like, that just has opened up a whole new dialogue because she first seek to understand rather than trying to go back with a rah, and to really unpack that. So I think once again, it's a multi-level approach, but if we can have that understanding, where's it really coming from, then we can ask better questions.
That's it. Well, I think it was about 5-6 years ago that I first profiled, and we were talking about she wanted to become a coach then. So it sounds like she's doing that with
my succession plan right there.
Well, that's like, James, that's part of the reason why I'm designing this program to help teachers facilitate these safe spaces, for the fact that there might be a young girl at home in her home life that something's going on. She might be self-harming, she might be eating disorder type issues going on, or family violence or whatever, and she doesn't feel safe at home, yet maybe school can be that safe space for her to come and say, hey, I need help.
Yeah. So if the teachers are focused on inspiring, they're going to be more open to a child coming to them, and the child's going to see them as being more open. Well before COVID hit, the stats in Australia was that girls between the age of 11 and 15, more than 5% will attempt suicide.
Wow.
More than 5%. That's an horrific number. And with people feeling, because one of the things when they worked on trying to cut bullying in the playground, they were quite successful by the way they structured things, but cyberbullying went through the roof because of it, because nobody dealt with the issue itself. They just stopped it happening. It didn't work on the bullies and what they were feeling. So, and when you're on cyberspace, you're faceless. And so it's like people who wouldn't say boo to a ghost, they're sitting in the behind the driver's wheel, and there's road rage coming out of them. So the more isolated you can be, step away from something, the more likely you can then go down that negative path. And so with COVID and with kids now being locked at home, and with the parents thinking they're not getting on, there's going to be a lot of unhappy kids. And that's going to then escalate all of that, because it's not so much in Australia, it's not so much the lives that we've lost due to COVID, it's the lives through suicide, depression, and all the increase in domestic violence and bullying. That's the greatest problem that we've got.
I agree. Interesting. I know two girls between that age group who are daughters of friends of ours, who've both attempted to take their own life. And the interesting thing though is it's not, without going into detail, the cause of the whole thing is not their school life. And it comes back to what Amy was saying about things being learned at home. There are issues in their home environment. And I just wonder, as a knock-on from all this lockdown and all these limitations of liberty, etc., that we're seeing in the name of COVID, how much more stressed both men and women are getting. There'll be, whether you're in a relationship, locked in a relationship, or whether you're a single parent, male or female, men probably have, each of them have their own things. Men may have this whole caveman attitude of, I have to be the provider, and they're getting depressed because they're not able to provide, and the women will have their own issues. I can't talk to them, I'm not a female. But it's like, how much more of that is now coming down and getting layered on to the kids?
So I can answer that, at least for here in Calgary. I was saying to Alan earlier about a project I'm spearheading here in my city. the call rate to the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter before COVID was moderate. The lockdown happened, and for the first couple of weeks, they saw no change. Yet as the longer people had to stay in their homes, the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter, their call volume skyrocketed because women needed help and they couldn't get out. And they've actually initiated, I think it's Canada-wide, they've initiated a sign, a symbol that if, say, like we're on FaceTime or Zoom right now, and a woman is talking to another friend or a family member, and she does this, that means I need help. My abuser is in the room and I need help now. So it's something Canada has started. And here in Calgary, because of the call volume of the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter, myself and a few others across Canada have initiated something called Kind Kits. And we are collecting hotel toiletries, travel size items that we're collecting, that we're going to put together into gently used makeup bags. And then right around Christmas, we're going to deliver it to the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter, so the women and children can have that tangible thing to say, I'm not alone, that there's other people in the city that want to help me. And, oh, by the way, you know, this little shampoo bottle is mine, that I don't have to give it to my abuser. Because a lot of the time when women, I'm going to speak about women because I'm female, I know men are abused. And like when a woman leaves her partner, she a lot of the time leaves with the clothes on her back and maybe a change of clothes, and that's it. So to have that tangible piece of this Kind Kit, this shampoo bottle, for example, to say it's mine and I am worth it and I am valued and loved by somebody in the city of Calgary.
And that's a beautiful initiative. Here in Australia, in Victoria, there's the Victorian Brotherhood, about 15,500 men who have all, the group at the top have all stepped up, and they're helping the men that are going through tough times. So we're all finding that the people going around, we're all in this together. But the people who are saying it were usually advertising something. But the people, and a lot of people got offended by that statement, but really we are in this together. If we want to really get rid of bullying, we want to get rid of domestic violence and things like that, we need to understand the perpetrators. We need to understand their life. And that is not taking away blame, because people think, oh, as soon as you start to understand somebody, oh, you're taking their side. No, I need to understand the whole story so that whatever I do can be positive and not just add to the problem by creating two greater warring tribes than we've had before. So how do I understand it? How do I step in? And how can I help everybody involved? Because the bullies are quite often victims themselves. And so we've got to understand them. And if we understand them, then we can break the cycle of what's feeding them in the first place.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of people just get to the point, oh, you're a bully. And that's the label, done. And the first step is to avoid the whole labeling. You know, there's a great book on, it's an ebook on about 100 and something pages long on psychology. It's called The Secret Keys to Persuasion. By Warren Blair, or Blair Warren. Can never get his name around the right way. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And this book, look, Google one of the two, right? The book it explores all of these sects and cults that, you know, commit suicide, mass suicide. And the natural thing to do is say, oh, they're all on drugs, they were brainwashed, they were crazy, they were psychopaths, they were whatever. And putting that label on it allows us to sort of retreat and be very comfortable and not have to explore any further what actually made it, you know, made them tick that way. And I think with domestic violence and bullying, a lot of people get that way. I was like, oh yeah, it's over there. They're just bullies. They're just wife beaters or whatever. And they don't look to understand, because you're absolutely right. You need to firstly get behind what it is, what's creating this.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody, or Doug Garth, we're one of the first men I interviewed in the panel project. Don't even know what I am. Campfire Project. I'm getting a bit tired. It's he was a bully at school. And if you listen to the story that they had on the project on TV, you just took that section out and not listen to his backstory, you'd think a terrible person. I got bullied all the way through school, but I considered Doug a real gentleman and a friend, a very close friend, because I was a victim. He was a perpetrator, but I understood his backstory and why he did what he did. 3 of his brothers committed suicide because of the bullying they received at home. So once I understood that, I understood where he was coming from. We then had conversations, and the first conversation we had was on the phone was an hour and a half, and we'd only just met each other. So don't just judge the person on what they're doing. Find out why they're doing it, because if you want to get them to change, it's the only way to change, help them change, is to help them find a new way of doing it.
If for 40 years, like I did, go to a school reunion and just realize what complete and utter wankers they still are. It was never about you.
I haven't been to a school reunion. I haven't been to my elementary school reunion. Granted, I now live in Alberta, and it's about a 4.5-hour plane ride to get back to Ontario to go to my high school or to go to my elementary school. But yeah, it would be interesting.
Because that's the thing, you'll find that if they didn't have any guidance along the way, nobody really, or everyone just kept them at a distance, labelled them and kept them that way. That by doing that, we also rob them of the opportunity to move forward. So if we're decent people, we need to understand them and come forward. So we're just looking at the time there, and that what I'd like to do is just ask a bit of what tips would you have for anybody who's listening to this? We can start with you, please, Aime.
Well, we covered so much. Though what I want to say is, if there's educators watching, principals, administrators, the key thing is remember your school culture. Remember to check your bias at the door, and to lift your students and empower your students and their social and emotional health right now, both staff and students, is vital. Excellent. And reach out to me if you want any support in those areas.
Excellent. And James?
For me, it's around getting the parents to provide a safe space for their children to have the opportunity to talk and to communicate, to find out maybe what is happening maybe at school. We do a little exercise each night around the dinner table. It's called Rose and Thorn, where each person will go around and talk about what's something amazing that happened to you today, which was their rose, but also then what was something that maybe was a challenge for you throughout the day, which was their thorn. And that just provides a space for each person around the table to share and to communicate. And that's creating a space where you can have dialogue, where you can start to investigate if there's something happening, where you can then, take things further, but creating a safe space within the family environment to open communication.
Excellent. And Paul?
Yeah, I'd also look to both parents and the educators. Firstly, educators indeed, check, like I said, check your bias at the door. And just because something isn't currently done the way you're thinking, isn't currently done the way it could be done, doesn't mean it can't be done that way. And I'd encourage schools, principals, teachers to investigate the possibility of starting somewhere with a bespoke project, even if it's they make it as one small part of the curriculum, a project which each child on their own can take through the year and do it, and from K to 12. And with the parents, don't just outsource to the school. The school is not there. I mean, in an abusive home environment, the school can be a safe place. With the right, with the relevant environment. I find there are so many parents in our community who simply outsource everything to the school. Oh, the school's going to take care of that. The school's got it right. The school understands. No, they don't. No, they don't. Your child, you have the primary responsibility for the care and upbringing of your children. They're not going to go in that school forever. They go to another school maybe. Don't just outsource thinking the school's got it right. Doesn't matter whether they're private, doesn't matter whether they're public, and it doesn't matter whether you're paying them or not and how much you're paying them. It's down to you to look at and understand your child. And I'm not going to lecture, but I'm going to for 2 seconds. Down to you to understand your child and make sure that they have the tools that they need to make it through school life, irrespective of how good, bad, or indifferent the school is.
That's it. Thanks, guys, because that's really brought it together. Like Aime, you've talked about the education side in that little wrap up. James, you're talking about the parents. And Paul, you're throwing in take personal responsibility. There's so many areas in which we can step in and do things. But as you were saying earlier, James, there is so much stuff there. Just pick one. Pick one that you can actually make a change in yourself. Not expect, I'll put it out, oh, someone else needs to do this, but what can I do myself? And just work on that one little aspect, because that one little shift just changes your direction over a long period of time by massive degrees, by a massive distance to where you were heading to where you could be heading. And every little degree separate, movement on every little new thing you do will just get you closer to the life that you really want to create. So, guys, thanks very much for coming along and sharing this time with me, because I've really enjoyed it. Don't know if anybody else has enjoyed it, but I definitely have, and that's what it's all about.
Fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
And everybody else who's been listening in, I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next Campfire Project discussion. And by the way, I put a questionnaire out the other day. So if there's subjects you'd like us to talk about, tick the boxes, or if there's subjects where you haven't put in there, put create one. Just a space there to create new options, and tell us what you want us to talk about so that we can do more about covering the subjects that really matter to you the most. But again, guys, I really appreciate your time, and also your friendship that I've enjoyed over all this period of time, all these years. And to everybody else who's been here, we'll see you on the next Campfire. Bye for now.
See you.